Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing my March TBR video with you. After February, I'm feeling very much in a fantasy mood, which is very exciting because I love fantasy books, so I'm always glad when I'm in the mood to read a lot of them, and that's where I am right now. My March TBR is going to be slightly shorter than my February TBR because I still have a couple of books that I need to catch up on from February that I didn't get around to reading, and that's largely because Chain of Iron showed up in the mail and it just like derailed my entire TBR. I was like, everything's getting pushed aside for this and I'm reading this immediately, and that's what happened. And it's an almost 700-page book, so it took a little bit more time than the other reads would have taken me. So I do need to catch up on those, and then in addition to those, these are the books that I'm planning on reading in March. So just to start out with some of those fantasy reads, the first book that I really want to get to, which is another very long one, is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan, which is the fourth book in the Wheel of Time series. I am planning on continuing my read through of Wheel of Time this year. I probably won't get to the end of the series just based on how long it's taken me to read the first couple of books. I tend to like to have a break between them. As much as I enjoy them and I love being in them, they take me a while to read, so that puts me off from diving into them right away because I know that there are other things that I also want to read, but I definitely want to get to this one in March. Then the next fantasy on my list is actually a middle grade fantasy, and that is Eva Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch by Julie Abe. I fell in love with this cover when I first saw it, and I've been really interested in reading it ever since, and I figured that this will be like a nice, light, fun kind of book that I can pick up after Wheel of Time, and I'll definitely blow through this one much quicker than I will be reading The Shadow Rising. This one sounds very much like Kiki's Delivery Service. It follows a young girl who goes to a town. She's a young witch and she needs to kind of prove herself there for a little while on like an apprenticeship. One of the things about her though is that she is not like a full-blown witch. She only has a little bit of magic and she's constantly feeling like she's not good enough, and when she goes to this coastal town, people are expecting an extremely powerful witch, and unfortunately Eva feels like she's not living up to their expectations, so she has to grapple with that, and it sounds like it's going to be super cute. I'm really looking forward to reading this one, and the second book comes out later this year, and I'm definitely going to be picking that one up if I enjoy this one. And then the last fantasy book that I really want to get to, which will actually be a reread for me, is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I've been wanting to reread The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings for so long, and I made a promise to myself that I would be rereading the entire series this year in 2021, so I want to kind of get on it and start with The Hobbit, obviously because this adventure predates Lord of the Rings. March also feels like a really good time to do it because it's kind of like the beginning of spring, and it's when I'm like craving fantasy and adventure, so I'm very much looking forward to rereading this one. It's been so many years since I read The Hobbit, like maybe 15 years. It's been such a long time, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to reliving it, and not through the movies because those do not live up to the Lord of the Rings movies. Then moving on to some arcs. So there are two arcs that I am just dying to get to. I'm so excited that they were sent to me. I talked about them in my January book haul, but now I'm planning on reading them in March because the release dates are actually still a little bit into the future, but I just can't wait any longer. And the first one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I absolutely loved Daisy Jones and the Six, and I'm so excited to read this book. This one takes place over the course of 24 hours, and we are following, I think, one of the kids of the band members in Daisy Jones, so I like that it has that little connection, but it takes place during this party. It's like a legendary end of the summer party that they host every single year, but there are all of these like dramatic things happening in each of the characters' personal lives, and everything kind of comes to a head, and I know that the mansion where the story takes place ends up in flames by the end, like by the morning of the party, and I'm really excited to see the progression of events and how things just escalate until they get to that point. It sounds like it's going to be fascinating, and I really hope that it lives up to Daisy Jones for me. And then the other one is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This one is a female-female romance, and it follows two characters who meet on the subway in New York City. There's a bit of a fantastical element to this one because one of the characters is actually from the 1970s. I don't know how she time travels to end up on this Q train, and that's where the two of them meet, and that's where the two of them form their relationship. It sounds really interesting. I'm really curious how that's going to happen, but I loved Casey McQuiston's first book, Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I've been so highly anticipating her follow-up, and I can't believe that I have it. So yeah, I'm not waiting to read this one. Then I would like to read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. This is one of the books that I meant to read last year, but I never got around to it, and I'm gonna do so this year. It examines race in America. It follows a Black babysitter who is taking care of a white child, and after the parent has some kind of emergency thing come up, she asks the babysitter to take the child out and just entertain her while the parent is like dealing with whatever's going on. And when the babysitter is in the store with the child, she's accused of kidnapping the baby. Again, it just ends up being an examination of race and an examination of white saviors, and it sounds like it's going to be a very fascinating and enlightening read. Then I would like to read The Lady Upstairs by Hallie Sutton. This is a new to me book that I just picked up in February, so you will hear me talk about it in my February book haul as well, but this one follows a girl named Jo who is working as a blackmailer for this mysterious woman upstairs. She takes on all of these cases in order to get back at men who are abusing their power. Something goes awry and one of her targets ends up murdered, so she needs to take on this other case, like kind of secretly and behind the lady upstairs' back, in order to try to free herself from this situation that she's in. And I don't know what's going to happen from there, but it sounds really fascinating. And it's also quite short, so I thought that it would be a really good kind of like palate cleanser book to read in between some of the fantasy reads that I have planned for the month. And then the last fiction read on my TBR is Alphabet Squadron by Alexandra Freed. This is the first book in the Alphabet Squadron series, and now that it is coming to a close, the third book's coming out in the beginning of March, and I actually just got my hands on a copy from Random House. I really want to dive in and just get into the series. I've heard excellent things about it so far. It follows an eclectic assortment of pilots and starfighters, and they are all led by one of my favorite characters, General Syndulla, who is from Star Wars Rebels, if you've watched that show. So Hera Syndulla, she is amazing. She's probably one of my favorite female characters within all of Star Wars. She's not my most favorite because Ahsoka, but she is definitely up there, and I'm really excited to read another Star Wars story where she has a prominent role. And then for nonfiction, I really want to read Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi. I read Stamped in February and it was so interesting, and I can't wait to get a deeper dive and a deeper look into the history of racism in the unabridged version, which Ibram X. Kendi wrote prior to Stamped being remixed by Jason Reynolds. I thought it was really informative, and I've been trying to read at least one anti-racist book per month. I actually read 2 in February, which was good, but I've been just trying to do research and trying to learn and be informed, and I think that I'll get a lot out of Stamped from the Beginning, so I'm looking forward to listening to this one. I'm going to listen to the audiobook. I listened to How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, and I really liked his voice, so I think that I will really enjoy hearing this in his own words. And then the other nonfiction book that I want to read is Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This was sent to me by Random House last year, but I hadn't actually gotten around to reading it just yet, and I really want to. This is a book all about finding your inner voice, and it talks about how women are often conditioned to be people pleasers and to stay quiet and to be good, and it examines what that means, and I think it's going to help you try to find your inner voice and teach you how to figure out what it is that you really want versus what society kind of tells you that you should want. I've heard good things about it from other people who have read it, and I'm very interested to see how I'm going to feel about it. And I think that's it for my March TBR. I don't actually have many new releases this month that I am ordering right away, I think, unless anything surprises me. There is the next Victoria Schwab book in the Cassidy Blake series, which is her middle grade kind of spooky series. I do have that one pre-ordered and I am planning on reading it, but I'm not sure if I'm going to wait until the latter half of the year and read it as kind of a spooky read in maybe August when I'm starting to get into the spirit of Halloween, or if I'll pick it up right away. We'll see what happens. I think that's everything that I have planned for this month, and then again I'm going to be catching up on some of the books from February that I didn't get around to. Let me know if you've read anything that I have mentioned. Let me know what you're planning on reading in March, and I will see you guys soon in a new video. Bye!